Well, it's that sweet sound of amazing grace that overwhelms us. It really does. In 1988, a concert was held at Wembley Stadium in London, England, to raise money for Nelson Mandela, who was still being held in South African prison. And you all want you to know that 150,000 people packed into this soccer stadium as millions of people from around the world watched it on live television as bands like U2, The Stones, and performers like Sting and Stevie Wonder, they played late into the night. And by the time Guns N' Roses took the stage, the crowd was very high, and they were probably very wasted. A few hours later, they left the stage, and the crowd continued to chant at a deafening level until the next performer made her way onto the stage. Her name is Jessie Norman, and she's an opera singer. A stark contrast to the day's lineup. And the people, at first they began to boo. And they called out names of well-known artists and bands saying, we want them to come back. But Mrs. Norman, she steps up to the microphone anyway, and she begins to sing. And as she makes her way through the first verse, you can hear the crowd continue to demand an encore from previous bands. But as she sings the second verse of Amazing Grace, the crowds, they start to grow quiet, almost solemn. And by the time she begins the third verse, you not only hear her powerful and booming voice, you also hear the roar of tens of thousands of people now singing with her. It's almost as they had gone back to the storehouses of their memories and they recalled the lyrics of a song that we learned years ago. And when sung in public, it brings even maybe a blurry-eyed, wasted man or woman to a focused sobriety. And that song, when sung in public, reminds us of what we need, what we've got. Wheezy, what you and the family were taught in the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church in Atlanta and in Nashville and Knoxville. Oh, y'all owe for the grace of God. These words should be said at my life celebration as well as our first preacher, Wayne Smith's celebration, and Bro's celebration, and Weiss' celebration. Oh, for the grace of God. Y'all, it's that sweet sound of amazing grace. And Meredith and Brett, this song will mean more to you all, Amazing Grace, than ever before. It will become one of your top songs. It's that sweet sound of Amazing Grace that does so many things. It saves us from the necessity of trying to prove ourselves when we already have the love of God. Y'all want you to know that it's the sweet sound of Amazing Grace that says, your brother, your brother-in-law, your husband, and your daddy. He's in the sight of Jesus and nothing more. I love Psalm 119 that says, it was good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. It's that sweet sound of Amazing Grace that calls out. And grace calls out and does not just say you're some disillusioned man or woman. You're not just insecure. You're not mistaken. You're not inadequate, panic, depressed. You are not just that. But this man was loved and accepted by God our Father. Y'all, whatever our failings are, we need not lower our eyes in God's presence. Unlike Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, we need not hide all that is ugly and repulsive. Jesus comes for us. Not just the super spiritual, but for us, the wobbly and the weak-kneed, who know they don't have it all together and who are not too proud to accept that handout of amazing grace. Many of us get a little bit nervous at life celebrations or cemeteries or funeral homes, and I will say this, in crediting his children, this is exactly what your dad would like. The clinging of the glasses, the food, the forks, the gathering, the people. And sometimes I often say, who's going to come? And it doesn't matter. This is a time that we get to give honor to whom honor is due. But we do get nervous at times, and we think, oh, we're not deserving enough. No, y'all, we're not. That's why he paid the price. You see, the expected condemnation is turned into a gracious consideration, all because of the grace of God. Y'all, it's called amazing grace, not universal disgrace. And so on behalf of Ed Lane's two beautiful daughters, my friends, those daughters are my friends, personal friends, not just their minister or their youth minister. I'm their friend. I want to welcome all of you, family and friends, where we will give honor to whom honor is due. We will honor a father, a dad. We'll honor a man who was called by this position in the late 70s to be your daddy, in the 80s to be your daddy. A brother, a neighbor, a team leader, a believer in Christ, a Republican. And it's my mistake, after I put Republican, I inadvertently put a sinner. And so I do not mean anything. I mean, we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so I apologize to Ed right now. I did not mean to put sinner after Republican. And all God's people said, amen. Okay, thank you. A councilman in the 12th district, an artist, an editor. I think it's very fitting that the Lane Report is out, the new edition. A chef, the mayor's friend, but anybody's friend. A traveler, a man who believed, a family man, a graduate of University of Georgia. But let me go back just before I sit down. A father that was a fisherman with them, a traveler that took them on vacation, and when they first got on the road, he immediately turned the radio station to NPR. Here's what the psalmist says: though he be dead, yet shall he speak, as long as you two are alive. And if you choose to have children, and those children, though he be dead, yet shall he speak. And so in just a moment, you'll see exactly what I mean in Ed speaking.
Ed and I were great friends, and he loved the arts, and he wanted to start a little nonprofit, and we did that. We called it Music Over Lexington. And we had a great time for a few years bringing artists into Lexington and featuring them in concerts. And every time I had an opportunity to be with Ed, it was a joyful time. So I thought that the song that came to me to sing today is a song about joy. His eye is on the sparrow. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and longing for heaven and a home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is he, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when songs give way to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From cares he sets me free, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he cares for me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I know he watches me. I know he watches me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wheezy Lane Walker, Ed's sister. I had to make notes so that I could get through this today. Seeing everybody here today is a real testament of Ed's life achievements. And I know most of you know him as a friend and a businessman and a civic leader, but for me, I know him as my big brother. As you can imagine, there are many, many stories I could share today, but Meredith limited my time. So our sister Linda couldn't be here today, but she asked me to share this one particular story, and you can appreciate it knowing Ed. It was in the mid-50s. We were living in Nashville, Tennessee on Nan Earl Drive, which happened to be right around the corner from Hank Williams Jr. One afternoon, when Mother came home, she found Ed was not there, and she asked the babysitter, "Well, where's Edwin?" And the babysitter described how this young lady, in the biggest Cadillac convertible she had ever seen, pulled into our driveway, got it turned around, and then Ed jumped in and off they went. Well, Linda and I can't really remember how Ed ever got himself out of that predicament, because I'm sure when he returned, my parents were quite angry. But Joe would have reminded me of how Ed could just grin and make everything all better. So that must be what happened, because he survived the day that he went for a ride with Lucretia Williams, Hank's daughter. And it's important to note that neither one of them are really old enough to have a driver's license. As a family, we went through a lot together. At one point in time, Ed and I had to go to Nashville and move our aunt out of her apartment that she had lived in for over 30 years. And it was a sad event for us because she could no longer live alone. The first night that we were there, I was feeling kind of down about the whole situation. And all of a sudden, Ed just started laughing uncontrollably. And I'm going, what? What is so funny? And finally, when he could regain his composure, he said, you know, it just occurred to me, you would think that in 30 years, they would have rearranged this furniture at least once. Well, needless to say, that kind of took the edge off of our task. The next day, we started cleaning out the drawers and cabinets and closets. Our grandfather and aunt had lived through the Depression, so I'm quite certain that they never threw anything away. There was a deep, dark closet in the middle of this apartment. And being the brave brother, Ed went in there and started pulling stuff out. He got real excited when he found this very neatly wrapped package tied with a string and brought it out into the light so we could see what it was. And he kept saying, this has got to be something good. Look how careful they were wrapping it up. It's got to be something good. So we're standing there, and he's gently unwrapping it. And when he gets it open, we just stood there and stared at it. It was a toilet seat they had replaced so many years ago and stashed away in the closet. In 1971, tragedy struck our family. When our mother and father were in a serious auto accident, which took my mother's life and seriously injured my father. It was at that time that Ed became the true big brother. He stepped up, he knew it had to be done, and he took care of things. And he took care of my father and my sister and me in that time. So the bottom line is that Ed could always see the good in every situation, no matter what. Sometimes it made me mad. Like, can't you get angry about that? But no, he would just grin and go on. And, you know, he loved a good joke. And he loved puns, but they were mostly corny puns. But we would laugh anyway. And I guess I would just say that he inspired us to be the best and to go for the gusto. And that is my brother's legacy. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name's Mark Greene. I'm the editor of the Lane Report and the editorial director of Lane Communications Group, which is the magazine's associated family of publications. I feel like I should begin with a good morning, which is how many of my conversations with Ed started, including the very last one only a couple of days before he passed away. I worked with our friend and colleague Ed Lane for the past 8 years and 4 months. Those 8 years have been professionally and personally fulfilling and gave me a good, strong push down the road most of us hope to travel, which is one of lifelong growth and learning. The announcement of Ed's passing that we had on our website quoted me as saying, "His energy, his intelligence, his enthusiasm, his optimism, and concern for his family, community, and the nation will be missed, but will continue to influence us. He was a leader. The man had an enthusiasm for life." He did. You know, it's obvious in the photos that we've been looking at, watching loop on the screen here. But like Wheezy is saying, and others, Ed was a happy and enthusiastic person. He could and would be serious and stern and thoughtful, but in 8 years, I can say I never saw Ed outwardly angry. Perturbed, yes, but he never yelled, except in happiness and excitement with a big smile on his face. And generally, that was when he had gotten an order, which is what he called making a sale. Ed was a great, great salesman. He was someone who, as they say, drank his own Kool-Aid. That is usually said with a note of sarcasm, but it additionally means that the product is one of their own making, and it's one they truly believe in. Ed did believe in what he sold. He made the Kool-Aid, he drank the Kool-Aid, he gave you a glass of the Kool-Aid, he got you to take a taste, and it was good Kool-Aid. When I came to work at the Lane Report, after spending 25 years working for newspapers, it took me months and months to get used to the feedback I would get from people who I talked to when I was doing my job reporting and compiling news for the magazine. It was odd feedback because it was so positive. They say that people love to hate their local newspaper, and I have to tell you it's true. You can't have a thin skin and work for very long as a newspaper journalist. But after I came to work for Ed and the Lane Report, CEOs and bank presidents and other business people and professionals I talked to nearly always would, with no prompting at all, tell me they love the Lane Report and they appreciate the job it does. And what I soon realized is that this is because Ed's magazines, at his direction, take a positive approach to and have an optimistic outlook on the world. They don't ignore problems, but rather than focusing on what's bad, the coverage highlights what people are doing to fix problems and make things better. Here are best practices. Here are some success stories. Here's how you can pursue your own success. And his political activity's been mentioned, and some of his council colleagues are here. And if you're a political person, you couldn't help noticing that Ed believed the Republican Party line approach in public policy matters was the way to achieve success. Ed was a respected local elected official here in Lexington for the past 10 years, and that means that he would walk what he talked. During my time at Lane Communications Group, there were quite a few political discussions in the office, often initiated by Ed, and I can assure you, I never heard him admit that any Democratic Party policy was a good one. Ever. And he was competitive. But first and foremost, Ed was a fiscal conservative, and thankfully he and I agreed on that. Ed was achieved that respect as a local elected official because he knew the numbers, and he was good at explaining what they meant. He'd been there and done that himself, and participated in literally hundreds of commercial real estate deals, and run his own business and signed paychecks for nearly 40 years before he entered politics. Several years ago, when I attended one of his rare political campaign fundraisers, he was usually unopposed, another prominent local politician and businessman introduced Ed to the invited group that was mostly also business community members. And he wrapped up his introduction with the highest praise that he could offer. He literally hugged Ed while saying, "Every time I did a deal with Ed Lane, I made money." And in addition to respecting the unique approach to journalism that Ed brought to running a successful magazine, I respected him for his willingness to enter public service and for doing it well and for the right reason. He didn't do it for self-aggrandizement. He did it because he believed good government is important, and also he loved it. Ed took it seriously, but there was a special tone in his voice when he talked about his urban county council duties. He would say he had to go to a council meeting, but the way he said it meant that he got to go to those meetings. It was a special privilege. He did love it. There were several times I was in his office when the phone rang. He would look at the caller ID screen, then he would nearly levitate out of the chair as he told me with a big smile, "The mayor's calling me." Our friend and colleague Ed Lane was a complex man of many interests and skills and talents, and it was to my benefit that a few of mine overlapped. In 2007, when I was looking to return to Kentucky and interviewed for the job of editor at the Lane Report, the previous editor had been there for a little more than 2 years, and that was a typical tenure. I told Ed I was looking for a long-term relationship, and he offered me an opportunity that I took, not knowing how it would turn out, but I was optimistic, and it was a good fit. So my own relationship with Ed Lane produced professional and personal growth and satisfaction, and in that manner, I made money. And for that, I will always be grateful and happy. I'll be happy. And it will be our pleasure to carry forward the positive and optimistic ideals that for 30 years Ed instilled in the pages of the Lane Report as we continue what he started with a smile on our face. And now,
Thank you, Mark.
my associate.
My name is Dick Kelley, and I'm a newly minted executive vice president at the Lane Report, and have been the associate publisher for about 15 years. Most of my 20-year association with Ed was grounded on the fact that our early careers paralleled each other, and very few people know this. I've mentioned it to a few people this evening, but we paralleled each other in both the ad agency business and in broadcasting. When he was at Compton in New York working on Procter & Gamble, I was at Leo Burnett in Chicago working on Kellogg, about the same years. We later both moved into the broadcast industry and worked in national sales, negotiating commercial time. I was in Chicago and Detroit, and Ed was in Atlanta. Eventually, we both worked in sales management at radio and TV stations around the country. I first met Ed in the mid-'90s with ABC 36, where we were working on a marketing campaign we called Making It in America Starts Here, which was really a celebration of what manufacturing does for our community. It was a dual platform television and print campaign that included both TV programs and vignettes and professionally written and photographed profiles about the manufacturers produced by the Lane Report and run in consecutive issues throughout the year. It had a big impact. It was very positive PR in the community, and it was a huge financial success for both of us. After that, Ed and I continued to kind of talk and have lunch occasionally, and years later, we were having lunch, and he was describing how the business was growing and expanding, and It was getting so large he couldn't really do it himself, and some weeks after that he offered me a position with the firm, and I accepted it. Over the past 15 years, I've really come to learn, after all those large corporate media jobs and so forth, both how difficult it is, but how extremely rewarding it is to make a small business work for 30 years. The timeline of the Lane Report started, many of you know this, as a fax 30 years ago. And faxing 30 years ago was pretty high tech. You know, I just talked to him, and I got the thing on my desk right here. The feedback from that was very immediate and positive from the people that he faxed it to. I use this in my business. I use it to help make decisions and so forth. So no surprise here, the entrepreneurial bulb went off and said there's a market here. And that was the embryo start of the Lane Report, quickly into a quarterly black and white with a green label. And circulated in central Kentucky. Then very soon after that went monthly, then went statewide. So now it is the premier business publication in the state. We like to say it's in every important briefcase in Kentucky. Aside too, we belong to an association of area business publications, major organizations in big cities and so forth, but we always went to the association meetings, even though we were probably one of the very smallest in the membership, because we like to, and he particularly liked to come back with one good idea and so forth. And he also liked to support that organization. Let Mark and I share just a few of the funny, eccentric sides that we experienced, peppered throughout our workday at the Lane Report. One was called the Good News Bell. And I was telling him about, I had that in some of my sales departments. It'd just be hanging on the wall, and somebody make a nice sale or something, and it rang. Well, that was something he thought would work in our place, but no small bell. We mail ordered a gigantic ship's bell from, I think it was a marine supply company in Falmouth, Massachusetts. And the thing was about this big around. The sidebar that you didn't really think about, a reporter would come in with a hot story that he just broke, or there'd be a nice ad campaign that came in, and that individual would go in and ring that bell. Well, it was ponderous. The receptionist sat right underneath there. And that poor woman would be out of her skin and, probably deaf by now. Weezy, you mentioned bad puns. I worked it right into my comments here. We'd sit in these meetings, and he would just wait for the right opportunity to lay out a real pot boiler. And the worse it was, the better he felt about it. And it made him the center of attention, not all bad. So I came up with a little Irish impinish in my personality, and I found an app, so when he would do that, I just slide my phone up and and he didn't know whether to wind his watch or walk down the hall. And months and months followed and stuff, and he'd lay one of those out, and then he'd look at me and waiting for this to go off. Sharing business lunches. We'd go to lunch or dinners, and I can see the driver behind it being the foodie in him and stuff. He wanted to experiment what was going on in the restaurant. But that meant sharing your entree with him. Sometimes 4 people sharing 4 entrees. Those rare occasions where I had my own entree, I knew I'd share a dessert. There are also reoccurring pet phrases. This one's from the 70s, ramp it up. In the 90s, drill down. Always run the numbers. It's our policy. And then Mark, I've got a great idea. His great sense of humor, I think, manifested itself just this last week. We were having some meetings with with Brent and Meredith and talking about this function and so forth. And someone said, what kind of remembrance, folks want to donate or that type of thing. And we thought, what would Ed say? And somebody piped in lieu of flowers, buy an ad. There was also a reoccurring gesture, it seemed that would come anytime there was a big, particular, exciting bit of news. And Mark helped me here again with this one. He'd raise his arms with, yay! Almost with boyish enthusiasm. And I've kind of noticed here, just literally in recent months, it kind of has permeated into our staff. Every once in a while, somebody will have some good news, yay! But on a more serious note, I've always admired Ed's attention to detail, meticulous editing, his sense of journalistic positioning and tone. Those are not easy things to come by. He always found a way, as everyone has mentioned here, to put a positive spin on anything. He was passionate about quality and excellence, but always acknowledged that total perfection was really a divine matter. And in closing, just mindful of a quote. He loved quotes. We put a lot of them in our magazines over the years, and it simply is, a man is not gone whose name is still in the conversation, and in that regard, Ed Lane will always be part of this company's future.
At least I'm not following Everett up here. That would be bad. Thank you. I'm Jim Frazier. I'm an attorney here in Lexington. I'm in the Chase Bank building where Ed and the colleagues are. So I'm was Ed's tenants, kind of a part-time political consultant, part-time lawyer, part-time wardrobe consultant. He never did do the no socks. I begged him, but he just wouldn't do it. But I was a full-time friend, and we were pretty close. We got together back in the late 80s when he was doing real estate. I was out of law school and learning how to do the same, and I learned a lot about commercial real estate from Ed. I learned what to do and what not to do, and I learned how to charge for it, which was a blessing. But he was a good mentor back then, so we kind of would be in and out of our own worlds with each other. And then we kind of got thrown together in 2000. 2000, we were looking for more law space. We were growing out of where we were, and Ed had his ear to the ground as always and called me and said, I think you could come over to the Chase building and I've got some property for you. Okay, so we go over to see Ed, my partner Brent Rice and I, and lo and behold, we end up moving over there. Ed negotiated a deal for the landlord. He was representing the other side of the deal, but he took care of me. I mean, I was, lawyers are not supposed to represent themselves, as doctors don't do that, but I represented myself, which was a mistake. But Ed made sure that I didn't do something really stupid. But it was a good relationship, and we became really close. That was the first time that we got very solidified in our thinking. I was a Republican, but he always said I was in the closet. I don't know what that meant, but I was a closet Republican. But we had a lot of things in common, real estate and politics and other things. So we talked a lot. And then, but it really became probably rock solid in 2004. He called me and said, I'm thinking about running for the council. I go, what are you doing, man? You're doing great. Why would you want to do that to yourself? I mean, seriously. They don't pay anything, the hours and whatever, but Ed believed in giving back. He truly did, and he inspired a lot of us, me included. So we got myself, Luther Deaton, and a handful of kitchen cabinet people. We'd meet up at the office and sit in that boardroom and talk. And he looked at Luther and I and said, if you get me the money, I'll get this thing done. I'll get elected. And I said, Ed, this is a big mountain we're going to climb here. This incumbent's been here a long time. You know what? We did it. We went and got the money for him. The people came out. The business people respected him. The community leaders respected him. And it was the happiest moment I've ever seen Ed Lane in my life that night. Oh, I'll never forget as long as I live. It was fun. We had a good time, but we became banded brothers at that point. From that point forward, I was the new James Carville of the town. I loved it. I took all the credit for Ed. I really did. It's what lawyers do. I know Bill Farmer's laughing at that comment with me. A lot of you have talked about the different adjectives to describe Ed, and I by no means have all the answers. You all have much more business acumen than I do, and knew him probably in a much different context. But for me, there were certain adjectives that were personal to me, unique, and each of us have our own view of what it was that Ed was to us. But to me, I mean, Ed, an exhaustive list is impossible. I sat there and tried to write it through this week, and in like 200 adjectives, I thought, this is ridiculous. I can't do 200. I mean, I promised Meredith I'd be in and out here in 5 minutes. So I tried to boil it down to what when I think of Ed and I say his name, what comes to my mind. And so I wrote down a few of them, and some probably are incoherent to you, and some are obvious and inconsistent and somewhat disconnected. But these are the kind of things that jump to me when we talk about Ed. Successful, a business leader, community leader, real estate guru, that he was. Funny, we've talked about it, and you'll hear more about being funny. He was very public, but very private, which was very interesting. For me it was especially. I got to know that private side of him, and it was very kind of an inconsistency a lot of people don't know. Chef, a giver, a deal maker, a gardener, a confidant. He was definitely that for me. He was uncomfortable in the limelight, which is interesting for a public figure because we all love it. Ed really didn't want to be the center of attention, despite what people may have thought. He was very business savvy. He was a bit of an introvert, very kind, generous, very proud, but very humble. He never bragged, and he had a lot to brag about. He was, I love this, he was definitely a political animal. My gosh, we would have more discussions about Rand Paul. I was so tired of talking about it. I mean, I said, really, Ed? I mean, can we just let it go? But anyway, so, but he was a gentleman, a friend, a driver, as we all know. He always drove everywhere he went. I never got to drive. Wherever we did, he always was the driver. I was the passenger. Very supportive, and he was a class act. Those are my thoughts. Okay. Funny. We've all had Dick's very, very good, and Mark, his sense of humor was different, but I'll never forget this. It was 2 days before Christmas, 4 or 5 years ago. He calls me on the phone. I on speed dial. I see Ed. Ed goes, I need you to come out in the lobby. I go, what's going on? He said, come right now. Come to the lobby. It's important. I said, okay. So I walk down the lobby, and I'm walking toward the lobby, and down the hall, here comes a race car, a little toy miniature race car, remote control, coming flying at me. I look over, and Ed's crouched down in the doorway of another lawyer's office, laughing hysterically with a remote control, that was my Christmas present that year. So I thanked him for my toy car. I didn't quite understand it, but he thought it was cute. He was a chef, as you all know. I got invited over to his house for Memorial Day cookout one year. I was there with Laura Boyson and some other business folks, and it was terrible weather. Tornadoes hit Masterson Station that year. The weather was horrible. Rain was pouring down, so do we go, do we not go? I said, we got to go. Ed's going to disappoint us. So we go over there, and Ed's cooking out, and the wine's going, and people are having a good time. And he said, I got to go check on the grill. I said, I'll go check on the grill. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So I run outside to check, make sure everything's not burning up, and they're pouring down rain. I'm in my usual attire, my holiday attire, my Italian loafers, leather with no socks. And I immediately hit Ed's wooden deck and slip. And I mean, I literally did I went down on my back. I thought I broke my back. I laid there, and I thought, oh my God, I'm paralyzed. I can't move. And then I realized I'd just been drinking too much, and Ed comes rushing out, and he almost falls on top of me, which would really have helped a lot. And he goes, you okay? You okay? I said, I'm fine, really. Just get me up. I'm soaking wet. Just get me a towel and a drink. I'll be fine, really. So we're sitting there, and he keeps looking at me all night. He keeps, are you okay? I'm fine. So he calls me next day. Are you sure you're fine? I said, I am fine. I said, what's wrong with you? He says, are you going to sue me? I go, no, I'm not going to sue you. I mean, seriously? You've been around lawyers way too long, yeah. That's what I told him, He's a deal maker, and we talked about that. In my mind, he's the consummate real estate guy. If I had a real estate question, I would call Ed Lane before I call one of my fellow attorney lawyers. He did a great job helping me get into the bank building, and we've been very appreciative of that, and we've been loving it there ever since. But you talk about defining moments in life. We all knew where we were if you were alive. Most of us, we weren't, hopefully, when Kennedy was shot. You know where you were when Elvis died. I know where I was. I was with Ed Lane 9/11. Oh, I'll never forget it. We were up at Lafayette Club. My partner Brent Rice and I were looking at the space for the first time. We were looking at the floor plans. We were standing up there. The TV was on, And all of a sudden they broke in with all the stuff on the towers. And we sat there for 45 minutes just glued to the TV. We never said a word to each other. But the rest of my life, when you say 9/11, I think of Ed. It's just, one of those things, who you're with, where were you, what were you doing? It'll always be with me forever. Political animal. I promised my wife I would not use the Rand Paul story, so that was terrible, so I'm going to ditch it. But it was quite excruciatingly painful for me. But I did a road trip with Ed, and I somehow got stuck with Rand one-on-one, and Ed left me there, and it was just anyway, he thought it was quite humorous. He really did. We laughed about it all the way back to Lexington. It took 32 minutes to drive, but he had to put the pedal down. But my favorite story was after the election, the first election, when we had done so well and kind of pulled the upset victory. Ed took my wife and I and Ron Schweitzer and his wife to dinner. We went to the mansion at the Marriott. So Ron and I were going to get back at Ed. We'd taken a lot of time, unpaid of course, and we said, well, we're going to let Ed pay for the dinner. We're going to kind of, get a little step up. So Ron's ordering the wine, and it's going, we're getting appetizers, the most expensive entree. Yeah, we'll take 2 of those, Well, Ed's looking over here. I can see him. He is a math guy. He knows his numbers. And I can see the mind going, how much is this going to cost me? So we get to the end, and Ron decides we need to have an after-dinner drink. So he asked the maitre d', he said, would you bring us some Remy Louis Tray? Now, for those of you who are not into after-dinner drinks like Alan Stein and I are, what that is, that's a very expensive cognac, and the guy says, it's $200. Ed goes, well, we can spring for that. We'll do that. We'll have a round of $200. He thinks it's $200 a round. Well, there's 6 of us. It's $200 a glass. But he doesn't know that, but Ron knows it. So we drink it down, and Ron goes, we'll have another one. So Ed's kind of getting uncomfortable. He said, well, we won. We'll have another round. Well, at that point, Ron decides let's just buy the bottle. And the guy he sets the bottle down, and at that point, we all had been overserved. And fortunately, we all had drivers. Yeah, right. And so we finish the bottle, and that bill comes out, and finally it dawns on it. He sees what we've done to him, or what Ron's done to him. And Ron always called him Eddie. He goes, Eddie, you starting to look like Casper over there. He was white as a ghost. I mean, that bill, it was $6,000 or $7,000. I mean, he talked about it for years. I mean, he still kept mumbling. It was absolutely hysterical. It really was. Talking about being a friend, I was a regular lunch mate of Ed's. Ed and I have had lunch probably everywhere in town, out of town, and all different venues, he'd call me with places to go that I'm not sure they even had their health license yet, but we would go, and it was fun. Like I say, he always drove, but was fine. But we had a great time. We had a lot of conversations, and a lot of memories were built around those lunches. But and he was always, I'll buy James. He always called me James. He's James, I'm going to buy it. Don't worry about it. I said, okay, fine. Well, after about the 4th or 5th lunch, I finally figured out why I was buying. Every time I would go to lunch with Ed, and he would pay for that $8, $9 entree, I'd come back with another $40,000 ad I bought from Lane Report. I opened this, I put my notes in this, and there's my ad. I thought, well, what did this cost me? So Ed was very business savvy. The $8 was a nice investment for Ed, but we were heavily invested buying ads, and I loved it, and he did a great job. He always gave me nice placement, and he would always call, make sure I was okay with it was a great relationship. I enjoyed writing those $40,000, $50,000 checks to him all the time. I really did. But it was fun. But seriously, Ed enjoyed life. Y'all have talked about his optimism. I think that he saw life through a lens that was truly different than most of us do. I mean, it was infectious. And I would go into the lunch sometimes feeling kind of down, and you leave it and you'd be up. I mean, because he really was always up. It's just one of those things about him that most people don't have. I will definitely miss our lunches, our phone calls, our talks in the elevator, the garage, and that infectious laugh that we all know what it was, but oh my gosh, I'll have it forever in my mind. But he was a great friend, and I do think by virtue of all those communications and things we did together, I'm a better person for it. And so for that, I thank you.
Good evening. That's hard to follow. My name is Regina Stivers, and I represent Senator Mitch McConnell in the Bluegrass region here. And I have a letter from him, and I also have a congressional record. But I first want to tell you about my friendship with Ed Lane. Ed was a great friend to me. My fondest memories will always be of sharing lunch with Ed, and it's been fun to hear some of the other stories. The first time we had lunch, after being seated and being delivered the menus, and I'm looking down and trying to figure out, what am I going to eat? Ed leans over and he says, "Regina, do you mind sharing an entree?" He says, "You can choose, or you can choose the entree, and I'll choose the side or salad." And then I said, "Sure." And then he would say, "And besides," he says, "it's the right portion, and if we don't eat an entree each, then we could have dessert and coffee afterwards, whatever you like." I'm like, okay. So I could tell he delighted in choosing the food and engaging with the waiter, the waitress, or even the chef. So that was a lot of fun. And he would always say, "Now see, isn't this the perfect size?" So the adventure began. And one of us would call the other and say, "It's about time for lunch soon." And he would always choose great locally owned restaurants. And I think he also delighted if I didn't know the restaurant, he would say, "Oh, you don't know about that one? Let's go, let's go." So during lunch, we would discuss everything from politics, of course, to his passion for helping his constituents in Lexington. But the conversation would always turn to family. Ed was so compassionate to me during my brother's battle with cancer, and especially when my brother lost his battle last August. But while talking about family, Ed's great big smile was always there when he was talking about his daughters, Brett and Meredith. He loved you both so dearly, and he made sure everyone knew it, and you were usually the topic of the conversation. He talked about your accomplishments and what you were doing. And even though, as you know, I don't know each of you very well, I feel like I do because of my conversations with your father. Our last lunch was in late June, and we shared a great lunch and great conversations as always, and saw friends we both knew. He would always see someone he knew, and usually 2 or 3 people. So we would be slow in coming into the restaurant, kind of slow going out. But I will always treasure the hug and the smile he gave me as we departed ways that day, and not knowing that would be the last time I would see him here on earth. But I do look forward to those lunches in heaven. And my challenge to each of you is to call a friend soon and ask if they would like to share lunch. Talk about our good friend Ed Lane and pass on the friendship that he shared with each of us. So I have a letter from Senator McConnell, and he regrets that he cannot be here today. And it says, "Dear Brett and Meredith, I am so sorry to hear about the loss of your father and my good friend Ed Lane. Please accept my utmost condolences. I know he will be greatly missed by the entire Lexington community and throughout the Commonwealth that he had such an impact on over the years. Through his publishing work, his business endeavors, and his long record of public service, Ed reached and made a difference in many lives. Your loss is deeply felt and shared by Elaine and I, and our prayers are with you. If there is anything I can do for you in this difficult time, please let me know. You are not alone in your grief. Many Kentuckians mourn the loss of your father today. He was one of our finest citizens. Everyone in the Lane family has my deepest sympathies. Sincerely, Mitch McConnell, United States Senate." And I'd like to read the beginning part of the congressional record in his words. "Mr. President, I rise to mourn the loss of an honored Kentuckian, renowned businessman and public servant, and my personal friend, Ed Lane. After battling cancer for more than 2 years, Ed passed away on August 2nd. He was 73 years old. Ed was passionate about supporting his hometown of Lexington and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. He was well connected to the state's business community through his work as a commercial real estate broker. Seeing a need for a publication for and about Kentucky business, he founded and was the publisher of the Lane Report, a great business news magazine for Kentucky. Encouraged by his friends in the community to seek public office, Ed also represented the 12th District of Lexington on the Lexington-Fayette Urban County Government Council since 2005. He was reelected without opposition in 2014. As a council member, he brought his business experience and his wisdom to fight for and represent Lexington businesses and his district. In addition to his public service as a council member, Ed supported his community through many philanthropic efforts and volunteer service. He served on the boards of many community arts and civic organizations, including the Breeders' Cup Host Committee, the UK Sanders Brown Center for Aging Foundation Board, the Lexington Downtown Development Authority Board, the Lexington Fayette Urban County Airport Board, the Kentucky Arts Council, the 2010 FEI World Equestrian Games Advisory Committee, Lex Arts, the Lexington Ballet, the Lexington Philharmonic, the Better Business Bureau of Lexington, Junior Achievement of the Bluegrass, the Mayor's American Recovery and Reinvestment Act Committee, the Fayette County Equine Task Force, the Commerce Lexington Agribusiness Committee, and many others. Ed was an artist, photographer, and art collector. He loved cooking, reading, gardening, and talking politics. He also loved fast cars, earning him the nickname Fast Eddie in the 1960s. Ed is survived by his daughters Susan Brett Lane and Catherine Meredith Lane. I was deeply saddened to hear of Ed's passing. He was a good friend, and I always enjoyed reading the Lane Report, especially Ed's engaging one-on-one interviews. Elaine and I send our condolences to his family. Mr. President, the Lexington Herald-Leader recently published an article detailing Ed's life and achievements. I ask unanimous consent that said article appear in the record, and it is incorporated into the congressional record, and I'd like to present that to the family. Thank you for sharing your father with us.
Hi. First of all, my sister Brett and I want to thank you guys so much for being here to celebrate our dad. Thank you also for the beautiful flowers and the phone calls and the food and everyone that traveled here. We're so blessed to have all the support. We chose the Boone Center for several reasons. Dad was a huge supporter of the university. He hosted company parties here. Dad loved the University of Kentucky, and he loved this facility. Dad also had all of his medical treatments at UK. So I wanted to give a special thank you to Dr. Phil DeSimone, who's here. He is a wonderful, caring doctor, and he was a fantastic friend to my dad. He came over at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night to be with my dad. I'm very thankful. Also, Vicki, who's sitting right next to him, you were a fantastic friend as well. I know Dad had a number of other doctors, nurses, and staff that took care of him, and he was so appreciative of everyone. I think especially the cute nurses. I know a lot of people are still in shock about the passing of our dad. Most people didn't even know that he was truly sick, and that's how he wanted it. In the end, I don't think Dad believed or maybe even knew he was as sick as he actually was. He wanted to squeeze every drop out of his time here on earth. He wanted more time with his girls. He wanted to see us excel, and he wanted to keep working himself. He was so passionate about his chosen professions. In fact, he was actually on his way to work on Friday when he got the news that his health had taken a turn for the worse. Even on Saturday, the day before he passed, he was looking at Lane Report cover options. This is the one he chose. Please take one. If you know our dad, he would always give you the new issue. Have you seen the latest issue of the Lane Report? So please make sure to take some home. I know he'd like that. My earliest memories of Dad were going to the grocery store with him on Sundays. Brett and I were both allowed to pick one item that we wanted on the trip, no matter what it was. So we thought we were pretty sneaky because throughout the trip we would stash some extra things in the cart, and we thought we'd get away with it, but whenever we'd get to the checkout counter, he'd discover all our extra loot. Sometimes he'd let us get away with it, but other times he'd say, okay, you need to pick one thing, and you got to put the rest of the items back. Looking back, he was probably trying to teach us a lesson on priorities, because there was always a lesson with Dad. I remember us going on fishing trips starting at an early age, and we went on all kinds of fishing trips. We went fishing on a camp an island camp in Canada. We went deep sea fishing in the Bahamas and the Carolinas. We went to Jamestown, Kentucky on a guided fishing tour. We didn't catch anything on that trip, so he was kind of bummed. And we had our annual Father's Day tradition of fishing at his buddy Steve Hutman's pond. We called that the honey hole. And the honey hole always provided a huge abundance of bluegills and bass, so we always felt like pros when we were there, like, look at all this loot. I don't think it was all that hard, but Dad was an actual pro at a lot of other things. He was exceptionally smart. Like, you could do crazy math equations in his head kind of smart. And I was always so in awe of that, being terrible at math. He was talented in so many other ways besides math, though. You've heard it. He's a photographer, an artist, a chef, a writer, a gardener, a poet, a reader, a wine enthusiast, a sports fan. He even watched all the girls' teams, always. Are you watching the girls' basketball game? No? Oh, turn it on. They're really good. He was awesome, and he really was a true leader. I think the word I've heard most used to describe Dad since he passed was that he was a true gentleman, and I just thought that was really cool. You've heard people talk about Dad and his love of food and wine, and when I think of the time I've spent with him, that was my most favorite thing. Sitting up at the counter in his kitchen, talking to him while he created some delicious creation. He would always downplay it, and he would say, oh, I just threw this together. I hope it's good. But it was always the best thing I've ever eaten. He was amazing. There was only one time that it was awful, and Brett remembers. It was the Boston butt. And we still laugh about it. It's been 15 years. That was disgusting. And we're like, Dad, it's always amazing, except for that one time that you made the Boston butt. I'll miss his saffron cardamom rice with green peas. If you've had dinner there, you've probably tasted that. He made it a lot. And I'm also going to miss trying new restaurants with him. Blake and I went to the Buddha Lounge this week, and we were sitting there, and I said, God, I wish we could bring Dad here. He would love this particular sushi roll we were eating. Several years ago, Dad decided he was going to change up our Thanksgiving tradition, and instead of turkey, we were going to have lobster. But it wasn't just any kind of lobster. He had to do it, grand Ed Lane status. So he had the real deal flown in from Rhode Island from the lobster guy, just for us. It was really special, and he had that lobster with a side of sausage, water chestnut, and mushrooms stuffing, and it was so good, and I'm sure we'll make it this Thanksgiving. In college, I'd come over on a lot of Monday nights, and Dad would cook dinner, and we'd lay in his room, and we would watch The Bachelorette. And it sounds weird that he would watch that, but we did, and he had the most hilarious commentary on the contestants, male or female, and he was so funny. And you've also heard this, he was punny. Dad loved a good pun. They were never good. I would always rather eat at his house than go to a restaurant, and Dad taught us so much about mixing flavors and creating a great meal out of whatever you had in the cabinet or the refrigerator. He was what I would call the MacGyver of the kitchen. Dad taught me a lot about the business world too, and about cultivating relationships with other like-minded professionals. He introduced me to his friends and business associates, and he took me to networking events that at the time I thought, I don't want to do this. But it was always fun, and I met so many great people through it that are friends today. And he gave me opportunities to work for his company when I was a teenager, and eventually as the editor of BG Magazine. Along with my mom, my dad helped instill a strong work ethic, a high-level goal setting, and above all, the power of positivity. Dad was not afraid to give you his opinion or tell you the truth, and that was in business, in politics, or as our dad. Recently, he called me to tell me that my hair looked stringy in a commercial that I was airing on TV. And I didn't take it as criticism, although I was like, really, Dad? I can't do anything about it now. But I took it as, hey, you can do better. And Dad really pushed us to be better in so many aspects of our life. Earlier this year, during one of the crazy snowstorms we had, Blake and I took Dad to have treatment. And there was so much snow on the ground, and it was coming down. And I was kind of annoyed to be out on the road, but it ended up being fun. And after treatment, we went to one of his favorite spots, which is a place called Jasmine Rice, which one of the places that, looks a little sketchy on the outside, but it's really, really good. And of course, he ordered for us, and we shared. Then after lunch, he's like, let's go to Dairy Queen and get a Blizzard. And he was so excited because apparently Blizzards are free during a snowstorm. So he was so pumped, he was laughing and ha-ha and just so pumped about it. So we got the Blizzards, and we're driving home, and we get on New Circle, and there's this woman and her child stranded on the side of the road. And so Blake's driving, and he pulls over, and he's helping her get out. Well, then we get stranded on the side of the road, and no one stopped to help us. So, we're spinning our wheels, and we're trying to get out, and Dad's like, well, we got this. So he's like, do you have a shovel? And I'm like, no, I don't have a shovel. What do you mean? So we took the only thing that we had, and that was real estate sign writers, out of my car, and we're digging the wheels out from the car, and he's laughing, and we just, pushing like hell and digging out with the writers, and it was so fun. It was just really, really fun. Dad was always smiling and always laughing, and even when he was sick, he never complained. He was so positive. He never wanted to pity him or treat him any differently like he was sick. He just wanted to continue on life as normal, selling a big ad for the magazine or attending council meetings, putting together beautiful editorial spreads in the Lane Report, cooking up a storm in the kitchen. Basically, he just wanted to be a rock star in his everyday life and just keep on going. A week before he passed, he had dinner at my house, and Blake and I cooked Mexican. And after dinner, he sent a text, and he said, I feel like $1 million. Your dinner rejuvenated me, not kidding. Thanks to you, Blake, and the tequila. Love, Dad. He always signed text messages Ed or Dad. Like, we know. Over the last few years, Dad and I had gotten really close, and we talked about our relationships and business and cooking and fishing, and he was so proud of Brett and I, and we knew that. And it was very evident when we found this big box in his closet that had every card he'd ever given us, a collection of newspaper clippings that we'd been a part of, school programs, her art programs, school plays, stuff from all the years. He saved all of it. And it was right there in his closet. We'd never seen it, and we found it, and it was really special, and it was just such a testament of how much he loved us. Every day, Dad would drive by my house on Tate's Creek on his way to work because it was straight shot. And he'd often call, and he'd say, hey, look outside. I'm driving by, and I'm waving at you. So I'd look out the window, he'd honk, and we'd wave, and that was it. And I already miss him doing that, but I know he's still around me, and he's still around Brett, and Dad will obviously be a legacy in the community, but he's more a legacy in our lives than anything, and I know he'll always be such a strong presence among us. A lot of that was his positive outlook on life, and I personally try to emulate that every day. In closing, I'll leave you with something I found on Dad's refrigerator the weekend that he passed, and it sums up the way he felt about life perfectly. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It's more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace that day. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string that we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Dad wasn't a glass half full kind of guy. Dad was a glass so full that it would spill over if you tried to move it at all. Thank you.
In life, we know that change happens. It happens all around us every day. But sometimes we fail to notice how that change impacts those around us. My father is a great example of that. To my sister and I, he was just Dad, the one who dragged us to the grocery store on the weekends, who advised us on life and love, who nourished our bodies with wonderful meals and inspired us to strive to be the most ethical, moral versions of ourselves and to be impeccable with our words. He was the pillar of strength, the calm in the eye of the storm, the stoic, strong one up to the very end. The loss of our father will undeniably change the course of our lives in ways we have yet to realize. But as I dig deeper and really think beyond myself, I have come to realize the life of this man, whom I call Dad, has impacted far more than just my sister and me. He affected and made an impression on everyone he came in contact with: strangers, friends, families, businesses, and an entire community. And there is no doubt the loss of this one man will be felt in each and every one of you here tonight, as well as throughout the Bluegrass State in the days, weeks, months, and perhaps years to come. We often see ourselves as so small and insignificant, but I am reminded tonight that one life can create a huge impact, and the loss of that life can create a huge void. I know he is looking down on all of us, urging us to use the skills we have to create something positive, just as we have done here tonight. Thank you.
And so you understand what I said. Though he be dead, yet shall he speak. As I go around third base, first off, from all of y'all, I want to be more like Ed. If I ever leave Southland Christian Church, I want to work at the Lane Report. Maybe be a councilman, but I'd love to be a lawyer also. However, I heard that Jesus was crucified between two lawyers. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. Two thieves or lawyers, whatever, okay? Totally joking. It makes me really want to visit your office, in your office. However, that's because of your brother and your daddy was so inclusive. Gloria, you and Kitty, the Lord worked through Romans 8:28, all things, not most things, not a good amount of things, but all things work together for good for them that love the Lord and they've been called according to his purpose. And so Jesus gave some comforting words. He said, let not your hearts be troubled. I want you to trust in God and trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms and many mansions, and I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come in and receive you. And Thomas got all nervous, OCD, ADD, and Lord, we don't know where you're going. How do we know to get there? And Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Meredith and Brett, he knew the way. He said those words. And y'all have no regret, y'all that were beside him. God is here. I'm going home. I'm going home. Going home. Tell the world I'm going. That's why all is well tonight. That's why there is a celebration. Our 12th district councilman, he knew the truth. And your brother, he knew the life, and he's finally home. He loved homes. He loved his home in Heartland Gardens. Y'all, 382.1 mile, I-75 South. He loved his home in Atlanta, Georgia. His first state, we'll forgive him for this, but 214.5 mile, Nashville, Tennessee, down Bluegrass Parkway, 65 South. He loved his home. 705.7 mile, Northeast, New York City. Loved his home. Ed knew that that home was a safe place and a secure place. And he loved to include you, and he loved to be included. He loved to entertain. I invited them to a big party with Jay McCord and myself about 10 years ago at Southland Church. It was called the Jesus Prom. It was a big, big party. 1,000 mentally and or physically challenged adults and 2,000 volunteers. And that, to Ed Lane that night, was the party of all parties. And so if Ed could speak, I believe he would say these words: "Grieve not for me, nor let one small tear fall, for what you dream of, Meredith Brett, I can see. And friends, 'tis worth it all." You know, in all due respect to the Lane Report, and when I was meeting with Meredith and working with Brett, I wanted the Lane Reports to be laid out, past, present, and it's interesting, it's the new one. However, in due respect to you all, I've changed the name of the Lane Report for the night to the Meredith and Brett Lane Report. And I have no gain for me or you in changing the name for the night. It's just the respect. Because the Lane Report will continue on, because though he be dead, yet shall he live. Timothy says, "I fought the good fight, I finished the course. Now there's in store for me the crown of righteousness." Folks, August the 2nd, this awesome, awesome dad, he was crowned. And he knew he was going home. He didn't want to tell us, but he knew he was going home. But he was crowned. And this wonderful, awesome man, he got to meet the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, which is why we can say that all is well. And so we shall dry our tears, we'll gather by the fire, and we'll carry on. For this is Ed Lane's Coronation Day. Heavenly Father, I praise you and I thank you, Father, for these men and women that gather to remember. Father, I just love his daughters and their family. And Lord, Ed included me. Lord, he included them and us and we and Lexington and Atlanta and Nashville and New York City. Lord, we had a famous man right here in Heartland, and some of us knew it and some of us didn't. But Lord, thank you, God. Oh, for the grace of God. Thank you, Father, for heaven. And those three words, all is well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this tribute to Ed. He was a friend of mine. Ed Lane, along with Bill Farmer and Chris Ford, were very instrumental in the Good Songs broadcast and moving over to the Lyric Theater. And Ed would always call me from time to time. And the last time I got to sit down with Ed over lunch was also the same last time I got to see Dr. McCorby. We were at Portofino's and having Kool-Aid. As I would do. And I remember we were talking about, well, he was talking about women problems. It's true, he was talking about girl problems and stuff, and I listened to Ed for about 20 minutes, and I finally said, "Ed, I'm married, my wife just had twins. I don't have women problems. I can't help you." He says, "Yeah, but you're a musician." I said, "Ed, I play the banjo." You know what you call a beautiful woman on the arms of a banjo player? A tattoo. I had just come out with an album. Ed has been to my log cabin on the hill, and we have a big organic garden out there, which I'd love to explore. We've been out there about half a dozen times and stuff. And I had just come out with a new album, and while we were having that lunch at Portofino's, he said that one of the songs that he really liked was a song that he loved both his daughters, he loved his family, he talked about them all the time, but there was this one song on the album that reminded him of Meredith. And so I thought, since This was for Ed. I would play the song that he liked best, I think. Written after seeing a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "The earth laughs in flowers." And he wasn't talking about flowers, he was talking about the ability for the earth and people to recover no matter what we do, no matter what happens. Hair of gold and eyes like stars shine like diamonds on my heart. You are love and earth to me, so flowers I will give to thee. The morning sun like marigolds I will give for you to hold. All my love and loyalty are in these flowers I give to thee. I will give you roses red and pick for you a flower bed, a living crimson tapestry. Flowers I will give to thee. Nighttime stars that shine give you rest and peace of mind. In the morning light you'll see a world of flowers give to thee. I will give you roses red and pick for you a flower bed, a living crimson tapestry. Flowers I will give to thee.
I'll be honest. Ed loved Brewster because Brewster loved his daughters. Brewster loved your daughter. Brewster loved your daughter. That's why Ed cared about me. He loved the Lord and loved all of you all, but these two, they speak volumes. And Brett, Meredith, I cannot begin to tell you your this celebration that y'all put together. I mean, you rose to the top, and he would be so proud. But you already had his acceptance and his love. So y'all, Lane Report knows this. He would always take it. He would want to have the last word. Maybe always want to have the last word. I don't know about that. Family, the last word. So Ed gave a gift to this young lady, and it was just Lord's timing. And so let's hear that last word, and then we will go.
Everyone here tonight has talked about my father, and we cannot deny that he remained positive no matter the situation. As I dealt with a personal struggle this past Valentine's Day, he reminded me of his, quote, positive thinking. And in closing, I'd like to share his message to me with you, as it captures the essence of this great man in one 50-second voicemail.
Good morning, it's your Dan. I just wanted to say happy Valentine's Day. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And just let you know I love you, and I was thinking about you. Keep smiling, keep positive thinking there, and all will be well.
All will be well. Thank you for giving honor to whom honor is due. And on behalf of these sisters, they love you and they're grateful. Good night.
Thank you so much.